It's a Final Word Daily with Adam Collins and Daniel Norcross for the Advanced Hair Studios, the world leaders in hair restoration. England have been thumped by a brilliant South Africa by an innings and 12 runs. Daniel, tell us all about it in 30 seconds.
England wrapped up the last three South African wickets with some dubious and unusual tactics, but some may say it worked, some may say it didn't. Come on, May, they only scored about another 39 runs before England were absolutely blown away by a scintillating bowling performance led by Kagiso Rabada, Anrich Nortje, the marvellous Jansen, the superb Maharaj and the brilliant Nkiti. There was some terrific bowling, hard, fast, vicious, tricky, and it was too good for England today, who came off losers by an innings and 12 whole runs.
I like that formulation, hard and fast. That's what Tony Greig would say when he was commentating on something like that. And it was hard and fast from Anrich Nortje, taking 3 wickets in 7 explosive overs. England all out for 149 in 37.4 overs. I think it was about 84 overs all up for England across the Test match. There's a stat floating around, isn't there, Daniel, about it being the third worst effort for England at home ever, or something. I'll tell
you, it is exactly that. Yes, behind the 1995 Edgbaston Test, when the West Indies blew away England on a very, very difficult track, and in 1888, a match that I didn't attend between England and Australia here at Lord's. It was indeed the third fewest balls that England have faced in a Test match at home,
right? And
it was the I think the 8th shortest or lowest or shortest games of all time. It's up there. It's absolutely huge. I mean, the game was won inside 2 days of playing time. That's 90 over a day playing time, don't forget, because we had all that rain on the first day. And it's testament to just how special this South African bowling lineup is. I mean, it was scintillating to watch. Anrich Nortje's incredible pace, Rabada's, accuracy and hostility, the way they were making the pitch work for them. And then right at the end, I mean, Marco Jansen only came on to pick up the last 2 wickets, and he bowled just utterly brilliantly at Potts and Anderson, especially at Anderson. He beat him with 2 fantastic away swingers that, Graham Pollock would have struggled to get an edge on, and it was just wonderful to watch. And in the end, castling Anderson with a ball of almost perfection, angling into leg stumps, swinging away, hitting the off stump. Phil Brown's got a fantastic photograph of it, which I'm sure you'll be able to see before long. And
look forward to that.
There is. He's showing it to the camera now. He's showing it to the camera right now.
What we can do, the wonders of modern technology. I can't see it yet, but I'll see it when this goes live in the fullness of time. You're at Lord's, and I'm not at Lord's if you're listening down the podcast feed and not watching on YouTube. So a lot to take out of this. First of all the South African bowlers made a contribution. You mentioned Marco Jansen at the end. The fact that as 4th seamer he was barely called upon in this third innings speaks volumes about how strong they are. Rabada, player of the match for his 7 wickets, but I reckon you could make a fairly convincing argument that the most valuable player, or the most impactful player perhaps, was Anrich Nortje. The pace he bowled at on the CricViz database that goes back to 2006. It's one of the quickest spells of bowling ever seen in England. He talked after play to Sky Cricket about rhythm for him, and when he's in rhythm, that he feels he can push that radar higher and higher, and he's such a handful, and he bowls with such anger as well. Dean Elgar spoke about standing at mid-off and I'm so glad I'm not down the other end. And bowling at that pace, you do, by definition, create errors, right?
Yeah.
And it's not as though every wicket ball he delivers is an absolute beauty. It's more the sustained pressure, and we saw Johnny Bairstow fall that way. It was the pressure from the over before, the cumulative effect, the compound interest rather, that gets him in the end.
Well, 93 miles an hour is very difficult to face, isn't it? And, he got Johnny Bairstow out to a brilliant delivery in the first innings, and you can argue that actually it is those contributions, getting rid of Root, getting rid of Bairstow. Those are the 2 guys that have fought back for England when they've been behind in so many of the Test matches. All 4 of the Test matches actually they've been behind at various stages, and either Root and Bairstow, or Root or Bairstow, with a bit of help from Pope and the odd contribution from Stokes. Those have been the people who have got England back into the game, and to get players of that sort of form out so regularly is truly astounding. Yes, the pace is what's notable, but the accuracy as well. I mean, he was a little scratchy to start with, but over the course of the match, he took 6 for 110 in 20 overs, so it's quite an unusual set of figures. But it's testament to England, their aggressive approach. So they went after anything that was just a little bit wide, and it would fly away to the boundary. But they were also being beaten for searing pace, and it was just scintillating to watch.
And as for Keshav Maharaj, wasn't even called upon in the first innings. 2 wickets before lunch. The wicket of Crawley, we might come to him in a moment, and the misjudgment also made there with Pope. So there's 2 wickets for Maharaj at an important time. And Geedy contributes, didn't get a wicket in the first innings, but finds the edge of Joe Root with a beauty. Bairstow we've already touched on with Nortje. I mean, and Ben Foakes plays a bad shot before getting off the mark, and that can happen, right? So it was relentless, and just throwing Maharaj into the mixer there as well, not needing him the first time around. I reckon you could mount an argument that with Nathan Lyon and Ashwin, he's right there on the podium with them as the 3 premier finger spinners in the world.
Yeah, he was very accurate, wasn't he? And look, the 2 wickets he got before lunch were telling, where South Africa had made it to 138 for 1 in this match before they lost their second wicket. England kept on losing the top of the order, and eventually that'll come back to bite you in a low-scoring match. That proves to be really, really vital. And the wickets he got were just pretty simple stuff. It was just straight balls. I mean, not a good shot from Crawley playing across the line. We'll talk more about him, I've no doubt. And again, Pope, closing the face, trying to work the last ball before lunch into the onside. But he brings the stumps into play, Maharaj, and he bowled, was it a 12-over spell, which, I mean, I don't know how much rest the South African pace bowlers needed, but there will be days when they will, and knowing that you've got a guy who can metronomically do that, and let's not forget, he's keeping Simon Harmer out of the team. I mean, this is a guy who's averaging, he's taken about 450 wickets in the last 5 years and averaged about 20, so it's truly preposterous, the bowling depth that South Africa have got. They're very clearly a side that bowling is far better than its batting. I do think their batting is quite vulnerable, and I think England helped them a little bit actually had they forced South Africa just to keep on trying to find ways of getting runs rather than leaving a lot of the offside open, that sort of thing, which was very helpful for them, then it might have been a different story. But I mean, I don't think it could have been a different story in the course of the Test match, because frankly, South Africa had the best of the conditions on the first day, used them brilliantly, got ahead remorselessly and relentlessly, and then used those 4 pace bowlers just to make sure that England could never get back in. And that was the difference between this Test match and all the other 4 we've seen. I think there was a real sense that South Africa came into this game a little bit riled by the way England have been, I wouldn't say arrogant, but quite pleased with themselves about how Bazball was working. They believe, Dean Elgar talked about it afterwards, they're almost basically saying there are certain verities of Test cricket that you don't mess with, and this is the way you do it. Now, I don't think that he's right, but I do think that it was slightly motivating for the South Africans, because they were sort of seeing themselves, are you painting us as boring? Well, what's boring about Anrich Nortje whistling it around your ears and bowling 93 miles an hour? What's boring about a 6'7" left arm swing bowler who swings it around corners? What's boring about Kagiso Rabada, for heaven's sake? And I felt there was a little bit of that there, and their flair is with the ball, and they acknowledge that, so they played to their strengths. In fairness, actually, it's not that different from what the Bazball philosophy is, which is, England's strength with the bat is to counter-attack, so they use that strength. I think we've all got into a little bit of conniptions about it, but Dean Elgar and the South Africans have used it positively to motivate themselves as if they needed it, and it showed, I think, today.
Yeah, absolutely it did. And look, let's go to the structural side of the England defeat here. Now, Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes were both asked about their style of play after the loss, and in McCullum's case, he said, in fact, he felt they might have been I think he said they were too timid against South Africa's bowling, which was an interesting observation given how irrepressible they were, which you've described already. I don't know how they could have done an awful lot more as far as aggression is concerned, but it gives a hint as to what messages are being fed through. And to that end, I wanted to raise the example of Matty Potts' dismissal, Daniel, and not to throw him under the bus necessarily, but just using it as an emblem of where they're at. Now, Matty Potts had in an over that was pretty well constructed by Stokes, where the only viable route to victory from there, maybe 20 or so runs in arrears at that point, was Stokes facing maybe 60 or 70 more deliveries, something like that, which probably means that Potts, Leach and Anderson from that stage need to face maybe 40 or 50 balls and help Stokes farm the strike. 1 ball left in that over, and he tries to pop Marco Jansen over the mound stand and into the mosque. For reasons that make no sense to anybody. I mean, that isn't, and I just think that this idea that the harder it gets, the harder we will go, that works when it's Stuart Broad, who has no capacity to defend. That is, by definition, the only way he can play. Matty Potts, on the other hand, you're asking him. I don't think they're asking him. I think he's taking the cues of those around him, that when it gets tough, he's just got to swing, when really what was called for there was any support they could provide Ben Stokes to do what Ben Stokes can do, to give themselves any chance of hanging in there in the match. And it became pretty clear when he went out they had no chance of survival and end up losing by an inning. So it feels academic, but after Stuart Broad whacks 33 in quarter of an hour and they put on 50 and 40 balls, they weren't that far away from parity. And I guess that's my point, really. It's that it's all good and well to have an attitude that's all about positivity and all about positive reinforcement and going hard, but the most positive, aggressive thing they could have done right then is to effectively shut up one end and give Stokes as much strike as possible, and that by definition requires Potts not getting out, not trying to hit Jansen out of the ground.
Well, you've absolutely nailed it. That's exactly what the positive approach would have been. The positive approach was for Potts to give Stokes the opportunity to be positive. Both batters don't have to be positive in order to have a positive approach. And I don't want to throw Potts under the bus either. He's an inexperienced player and he's been encouraged to go for it. And perhaps, in time, if he has a longer Test career, he'll be thinking to himself, well, these are the moments where I stick in with someone who can go berserk at the other end, give ourselves a chance, a once-in-a-generation player like Stokes. But, in the Test match special box, there was a feeling that it felt a bit harebrained. And it was sort of emblematic of a bit of occasional moments of harebrainedness. I want to emphasise, though, that England didn't get out to a Bazball. They didn't get out charging down the wicket, spooning the ball up in the air. They got out to some old-fashioned brilliant balls and some old-fashioned just poor executions of shots. Crawley's sweep, for example. That wasn't a Bazball shot. That was just a guy whose brain looks a little bit fried to me, and it was exemplified by the fact that he didn't really show any interest at all in DRS. It just worked the ball into the onside for a lovely, comfortable 2 into the onside, just the right way to play against Maharaj. Then the very next ball puts a great big foot down the middle of the pitch. Tries to sweep a straight one, which is something that really good sweepers like Root don't tend to do. They tend to sweep outside the line. It thudded into his pad on the knee roll, and it looked a little marginal, actually. I mean, it was straight, but was it going over the top? And he just walked straight past Lees and towards the pavilion and barely stopped. And I think it looked to me like Lees was the one who was suggesting to him, we could refer that. I mean, did you get an edge? How far forward do you think you were? That sort of thing. And none of that happened, which suggests to me that with Zach Crawley, he's reached a point when the humane thing to do is to let him go and play cricket elsewhere, away from the glare, away from the spotlight, hit some balls. Get in, stay in a bit longer, because it must be really difficult, and it's not going to get any easier at Old Trafford and the Oval, because these 4 bowlers aren't going anywhere anytime soon. So, it just looked to me like that's an area that England will have to think about changing.
Yeah, and looked at the wash-up of the Crawley question that's coming up now. Brendan McCullum fielded that on Sky as well, and when he's failed previously, they said, well, it's his shirt and we back him and he'll be inconsistent, but he'll be a match winner. They said all of that, but he came short of saying he'll definitely be in the team, because he said he'll wait to see the conditions in Manchester. So I suppose they're building a bit of a permission structure to, as you kind of put him out of his misery. And that's not to say Zach Crawley hasn't got the skills to be a match-winning Test player. I'm a bit unconvinced by the argument that he can't be consistent, by the way. We've seen lavish, aggressive players be consistent and match winners all at the same time. But anyway, put that to one side. The idea that he'll be able to find his touch between now and next Thursday in a must-win Test match feels a little bit far-fetched. And look, they have named a squad for the first 2 Test matches. There isn't another ready-made opener there to play necessarily, but they could get resourceful and give him the chance to go down to the lower level. And cliched as it is, there have been players forever who've been omitted from Test teams, go back to domestic cricket, dominate at that level, and then return to be much better at the top level. I see no reason why that can't be the career arc for Zach Crawley, who clearly is a very gifted cricketer who's badly out of form, and that's okay. Well, young players can be out of form. He's got time on his side, he's got confidence for days, he's got all the shots. He just needs to spell away, and I think that's the right thing to do for him, rather than creating a dilemma, or a climate rather, where you look at him statistically and what is he averaging 18 across the last 18 Test matches. It can put him under so much pressure, so much in the firing line, that they're almost making a rod for his own back to an extent.
Absolutely. 18 off the last 18 matches. Only Javid Omar at the start of Bangladesh's Test match journey. And Craig Brathwaite of top order batters have had such a long stretch at such a low average. So we've got a strange thing actually in England where openers, they come in, they do a season, and if it's not Alistair Cook, then off they go. And so the fear of being dropped and the fear of failure is a very real one, because there isn't that flexibility.
Sure.
I mean, you don't want to get into the old Hick Ramprakash world where people were coming in and out being dropped 23 times in their career or whatever it was. But by the same token, you can have a happy medium between that. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if from within the squad someone like Harry Brook comes in. I can genuinely see that happening and opening the batting, because I'm not sure Zach Crawley particularly wants to be. I mean, look, I'm putting words into his brain, and I'm sure he would thoroughly disagree with everything I'm saying. But I'll put it another way. Harry Brook is there. I don't think he's going to be in as bad nick. It's quite a risk putting him up to open, but is it a risk if your opening partnership is continually failing? So they really wanted to play.
And they can make amendments. They can make amendments to the squad as well. I mean, the squad's only as relevant as the team they want to pick next week at Manchester. We routinely see additions to squads. Look, if they really wanted to, I don't think they'll do this, by the way, but if they wanted to pick Rory Burns or Dom Sibley, they'll just do it, right? So that's the reality of the situation. And as Jeff and I have said on the show repeatedly, I think the language around players being left out of teams is too assertive, aggressive, definitive.
Yep.
You know, they've been sacked, they've been axed, they've been dumped. Well, no, I think in this case, it's like Zach Crawley is going to be a long-term winner for England, probably. Not definitely, but probably. All signs point towards the fact that he's got enough going on. Give him the best opportunity to do that, which isn't being in the frying pan against Nortje, Rabada, Ngidi, Janssen, Maharaj right now when he's so desperately out of nick, and therefore you would assume so short of confidence. So we'll see what they do with that, Daniel. And yes, the next Test match, they've got to bounce back and win two on the bounce. Just to return to South Africa before we get to the Hall of Fame, we mentioned this in the preview a few days ago at Lord's, that they've been very quietly pulling together a pretty good Test team. They weren't in good nick 2 or 3 years ago. Now they are. Indeed, they've got 1 foot in that World Test Championship final by the looks of things, given the way they calculate that competition. There is a pretty strong chance they'll be back in England next year, back at Lord's next year, likely playing Australia in the World Test Championship final if things stay the way they are. And what a credit to Dean Elgar that would be, taking on the job when they felt like they were at a bit of a low ebb, and they've coalesced around him, and good luck to them for it.
It'd be marvellous, and it's on the back of a really good bowling attack, and that's how it always is.
Yeah.
You know, I think their batting is a little bit weaker than a lot of the major other countries around there at the moment. Weaker than India, I think a little bit weaker than New Zealand, and certainly weaker than Australia. But their bowling attack is right up there, and if you've got a bowling attack that can bowl sides out for under 200, then that covers up for a little bit of the inexperience that they've got in their batting side. And yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we're back here reporting on them in about 10 and a half months' time.
All right, Daniel, let's move to the Final Word Hall of Fame. The Final Word Hall of Fame for the Advanced Hair Studio, the world leaders in hair restoration. I don't need it. You can see my hair. Great head of hair. Daniel, not so great. Daniel probably could do with some support up top. That's what we're working towards at the moment. advancedhairstudio.com/final word. 15% discount, which we will get for you, Daniel.
Yes, please.
All you need to do is pop your details in there, and you're through to the semis without dropping a set. You've got 1 million people who've used their service over the last 3 decades. A 100% guarantee of their service. Many cricketers who've taken up the Advanced Hair service over the journey as well, and 15% off is a pretty decent whack. So jump on advancedhairstudio.com/final word, because Daniel, as we know from Tony Gregg via Billy Birmingham all those years ago, if you ain't got the locks, you ain't on the box. And if you want to be on TV, Daniel, and we know you do, of course you do, we've got to get your hair done in the off season. That's our job.
Well, I know,
our obligation.
I know. Nick Knight and Mark Nicholas, all that lot. They got beautiful hair, beautiful lustrous hair. Yes, Phil Tufnell told me I needed to get it done as well. So look, it comes from the very top.
All right, so our final word nomination for the most final word moment of the day. It feels like the Stuart Broad Award right now, Daniel. Yeah. We've been with Broady pretty much every day, seemingly for the entirety of the summer. Today there was that goalkeeper effort catch to start the day, which I'll let you elaborate on. I think you were commentating at the time, and there was also the way that England bowled at the start, which is probably more a nomination for the anti-Hall of Fame, not taking the second new ball, not using Anderson, using the short ball attack, which they've convinced themselves works in all situations, but in doing so has probably given up the elements of surprise.
Well, it very much has done, hasn't it? So we were all wondering about his short ball. So we go, oh, it's okay, there's 3 overs to go to the new ball, and then Broad pulls off an absolute worldie. Second ball of the day, was it? Rabada pulling it high above his head, takes a like Stokes-like catch at the oval. It was brilliant. So then we're eating our words, and then they do take the new ball after 80 overs, but it's Stokes and Potts that keep it, and they're banging it in, and Anrik Norkier has an average of 6. He's sauntering his way to a very cultured 28 not out. The issue I have with it is that yes, it probably is true that short balls have got a lower average when getting out tail enders, but if you bowl 6 short balls and over, then you're not bowling the surprise short ball, and it might be that having just 1 or 2 short balls and over might be the reason why it's having such an impact. So there was that. But then my actual Hall of Fame moment, because I mean Broadie's catch definitely, but Broadie's dismissal, because it was a beautiful beautiful piece of bowling from Rabada
again.
There's all this pace on show, and Broad is a guy you think we're going to get him out with pace, and Rabada gets him again with a slower ball, spoons a catch to mid-off to actually end a rather entertaining partnership. 35 Broad got joint top scorer with Alex Lees. So yeah, really clever bowling. And just one other note, Stuart Broad today became the first player in Test cricket history to take 550 plus wickets and score 3,500 plus runs. Bit abstruse, but I'll take it.
You take it.
Yeah.
You take it take those stats where they are. And I agree, by the way, that Rabada. You could hear when Broad hit the ball, he's like, oh no, and it felt like that, didn't it? That he got out exactly the same way about 29 hours earlier or something like that. So Stuart Broad back into the Hall of Fame where he belongs. That might be where we put an end to the show today. If you like what we do, patreon.com/The Final Word. We're going to have story time coming soon, Daniel, over the weekend. Jeff and I recorded that earlier today. Another good one. Jeff's in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the moment. He's been driving across the country, so you'll hear from Jeff and what he's been up to. And we had our big Final Word meet up last night at the pub, which you're at as well, Daniel. It was really nice to have a lot of our listeners all brought together, the nicest corner of the internet that it is. We'll have more daily programs coming to you from Manchester next week at Old Trafford, where Daniel will be. We'll keep bringing him to you about an hour after the close of play. You can watch them on YouTube, you can listen to them on the pod feed, and it all comes to you thanks to the Advanced Hair Studio, the world leaders in hair restoration. advancedhairstudio.com/final word to get 15% off. That's enough from us. Adam Collins, Daniel Norcross, South Africa victorious by an innings and 12 runs.
Goodbye.